Welcome to Raven Talk, the official podcast of the Raven Tribe. The Raven Tribe is a home for warriors on the path, and is dedicated to training warriors for the battlefield of life. Visit us on the web at theraventribe.com, where you can learn more information on membership, warrior training, as well as links to our official YouTube channel, Facebook group, apparel store, and our official bookstore, Marshall Books. Welcome back, Tribe. Today we're here with special guest, Guru Michael Schwartz from the World Serrada Escrima Federation, and we're going to be discussing Serrada Escrima. Guru Michael, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for being on the show with us. So, Guru, for the audience at home that may not be familiar with you, would you do me the favor of giving us just a brief introduction of yourself and a little bit about your training background before we get started with the discussion on Serrada Escrima?
Sure, not a problem. Actually, I started my martial arts training, back as a youth, as most do. I introduced initially to boxing by my father at an early age in the early 70s, and followed up on that training. And then, of course, as most individuals at that time, started to have exposure to Bruce Lee, exposure, of course, to Hapkido, Bong Su-han style through the Billy Jack movie. So that actually got me interested in kicking and punching, so to speak, and that as more of a diverse combat style as opposed to strictly boxing. So I began my training in Muay Taekwondo, Hapkido, and Judo. That was around 77, right in that range. I got my initial black belt after about 2.5 years of training under Master Chang Hee-Yun at the time. I continued with that training for a number of years after, on into about 83, 84. It was about that time, actually, I would say closer to 83, that I just didn't really feel, due to the movement of the Korean systems, or in particular the Korean system of Taekwondo, to move to become a Olympic sport and to become more sport oriented as opposed to self-defense oriented sparring and fighting system in combination with the Hapkido and the Judo. And so with that, I started to explore a little bit more. And got involved with Goju-Ryu karate as well as Aikijutsu, and then finally was further introduced to the Filipino martial arts through a local school in the St. Louis, Missouri area called the California Martial Arts Academy. For those who weren't aware, California Martial Arts Academy in St. Louis was initiated by a gentleman by the name of Jay D'Amato. Jay D'Amato was associated at the time with Guru Dan Inosanto. And, of course, he brought the Inosanto blend as well as Muay Thai and Serrada Escrima into the St. Louis area. At that time, after attending classes and so forth, and introduced during a seminar presentation, I started to have more of an affinity towards Serrada Escrima. And the system at that time of Serrada Escrima was being introduced through Jimmy Kokosa. And Jimmy Kokosa was one of Angel Cabales' original master level instructors of the time. And shortly thereafter, though, unfortunately, I had left to go into military service and join the Navy. While I was in the Navy, I continued training within the Filipino systems, as well as with Taekwondo, Tang Sudo, Hapkido, as well, and furthered my discipline within the Korean arts, as well as practiced a bit more in Muay Thai. After I had left the military and come back into the St. Louis area, I began looking for other opportunities and earned further recognition in regards to the traditional martial arts through further Taekwondo and Hapkido training. The martial arts academy that was in existence that I'd mentioned previously, California Martial Arts Academy, was no longer in business as I knew it at the time. And so I went back, of course, then to more traditional training methodology. I've gotten a level 3rd degree black belt in Taekwondo. And then, after further research, found an instructor who was an original student of Jimmy Chicosa's here in the area, but who had actually then, after working with Jimmy Chicosa, earned his master level certification under Angel Cabales directly, and that gentleman's name is Chuck Cadell. And Chuck was a fascinating and diverse instructor. I immediately found a home within his school and within his system of teaching, and I stayed with him for a number of years. And finally, he entered into the Illinois Department of Corrections. That was around 1997, 98. I trained with him from the early 90s, like 91, 92, up until that time. And because of his scheduling and his work schedule and so forth, he was teaching primarily private instruction, as well as teaching within the Department of Corrections within the state of Illinois, and developing a program for the Department of Corrections. So he was quite busy, as you might imagine. I had reached a level of basic level instructor under Chuck to backtrack a little bit, in 1995. Without looking directly at my certification, I can't give you an exact month, but it was in 95. And after that, I had continued to pursue instruction under him, as I'd said, into his intermediate level program, and was beginning to test for the intermediate instructor level in his particular program. And that was, as I said, at the time that he was entering the Illinois Department of Corrections. I then pursued further instruction under a gentleman by the name of Anthony Davis, another original student of Angel Cabales and a direct student of Angel Cabales, and furthered my practice and my education in Serrada Escrima through Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis then had, after several years of working with him, had promoted me to master level instructor, or Panguwang Guru, as is stated on my certificate, in 2006, 2007, right in that range. And since then, I've been associated primarily with Anthony Davis, with the World Serrada Escrima Federation, and have been teaching under that auspices since. In addition to that, I've also found association within the World Martial Arts Federation under Danny Lane. Danny Lane is a contemporary of Chuck Norris, and he had promoted me to sixth level black belt in his particular federation. I sit on his board as a Filipino and eclectic system board member and director. And so since that time, I was nominated and took over the World Serrada Escrima Federation and currently the sitting president of that organization, and have been since, it's been 5 years, so 5 or 6 years. Wish I could be more precise on that as well. However, that said, that levels essentially my experience as a student. However, as a teacher, one never stops being a student, so I continue to learn and continue to grow and actually learn from my students a great deal. As an instructor, I feel that it's important for the instructor to also learn from the students as well as for the students to learn from the instructors.
Guru Mike, let me ask you something. The Serrada Escrima, what part of the Philippines is it from? Share with us a little bit of the background, because to say Filipino martial arts is such a broad blanket statement, and I think people oftentimes will kind of take for granted that these arts are not all the same. They don't all have the same history. They don't all have the same, flavor or approach to training. So give us a little bit of information, a small history lesson on what Serrada Escrima is, where it came from, what it's about.
Sure. Absolutely, not a problem. Serrada Escrima, or to be more precise, Cabales Serrada Escrima, was initiated or founded by its grandmaster and founding father, Angel Cabales. Angel, he was born early 1900s, 1916, 1917, right in that range. He'd moved to the United States, from my understanding, the latter part of the 30s, 1930s, 38 or 39. And he's actually acknowledged as the founding father of Escrima within the United States. He was the first person to open a school in Stockton, California, that taught the art of Escrima to both Filipino as well as non-Filipino students. Grandmaster Angel was a person that did not believe that Filipino martial arts should be limited strictly to the Filipino native. And therefore, he accepted white students, black students, Latino students, whoever had the interest and the desire to learn from him. Angel himself was initiated into the Filipino arts by a gentleman by the name of Felicimo Dizon. Felicimo Dizon had a system called De Cuerdas. And so Serrada Escrima was actually developed by Angel Cabales from his being a student of De Cuerdas and a student of Felicimo Dizon. At the time, Felicimo Dizon and Angel were working on the docks of the Philippines, actually in Manila. And Dizon had taught Cabales the stick fighting skills that, were needed at that time. They had trained together on a daily basis with Kalagon, dagger, and empty hands. And therefore, Cabales trained extremely hard, became fluent in the many aspects of Dizon's decorative system. And of course, through his traveling experiences, made his home in Stockton, California. In 66, he then decided to teach Serrada Escrima to the general public in Stockton. And he had always enjoyed, sharing his system, as I said, with people of diverse background. At the time, his school was in the back of a Chinese restaurant that still exists in Stockton, California, and there's some of Angel's descendants, Grandmaster Vincent Cabales, as well as Grandmaster Darren Tabone, were still teaching in that location up until a couple of years ago. And so on separate nights, on separate evenings, and no need to really get into the where, why, for, and how of that. It was just a scheduling thing. So then at the time, he had also had friendships with Grandmaster Gilbertino, as well as Grandmaster Leo Hiron, and Grandmaster Hiron, as well as Grandmaster Chino, were welcomed in, and all three taught within the same location for many years in the late 60s and early 70s. And so, of course, as you might imagine, with three different Filipino grandmasters and founders of systems, there was I can only imagine. I'm sure everyone else can only imagine how much information was shared between those three gentlemen at the time. And I wish that I could have been a student or merely a fly on the wall to kind of watch the activity going on at the time. But at any rate, so that's essentially the brief history, if you will, of Serrada Escrima and how it was developed out of the zone decorative system by Angel Cabales.
Now, Guru Mike, can you tell us a little bit about some of the unique features of Serrada? What makes it different than other systems of Escrima? Is it, and I have a lot of questions for you. I know, and the audience may or may not know this, and it may be a misconception on my part, but my understanding is that Serrada is especially geared towards very close-range combat. Is that something that's accurate? I mean, not to say that the other ranges aren't looked at, but I've always heard that that's kind of a specialty of the system.
That is true, but true to an extent. And as you might, as many may know or many may not know, actually, when Gulurdan began to learn the Filipino martial arts, one of his original instructors was actually Grandmaster Angel. He and his folks would travel up from Los Angeles up to Stockton, California on weekends to learn from Angel. So you can imagine, how special it was to train with Angel Cabales in the first place. A common way to measure, first of all, the length of a Serrada stick is to basically check the distance from the armpit to the wrist. So it's somewhat individualistic, as you might imagine, because everyone's arm is a bit different length. A common length for a Serrada Escrima stick is usually 18 to 20 inches, so quite short in comparison to the rest of the Filipino martial arts. And it's commonly seen practiced in short range. However, that's more of a misnomer, really, because it's more of a medium range, medium to corto range, or medium to short range, rather than strictly short range. And also, quite surprising, there is some long distance training within Serrada Escrima. It's not always as prevalent and not always that Serrata is not always recognized for because the length of the stick is so short. However, there are long-range movements with the short stick. However, distancing being important, you're not going to get that far away to perform those long-range movements as you would with a 28-inch baston, as you might imagine. The medium range to short range is essentially where the practitioner can hit their opponent's body, and primary weapon will still be out of range for the secondary weapon, without a change of footwork. One of the things that is common, or that is, I guess it's special, that I find special within Serrada Escrima, is that each particular counter sets you up for the next counter or the next angle of attack. So in other words, you're always, always, always facing the angle of attack, regardless of where it's coming from. And that's what's particularly special to me, and one of the things that I emphasize within my teaching, as well as the footwork of Serrada Escrima, which is also very important. As I said, Serrata also uses a medium range of, or a medium frame of footwork, or a medium frame of work. It's the footwork in that regard is normally considered, if you will, 60-40 in regards to stances. And to get into, to really understand Serrata, you really have to appreciate and understand the footwork. And without really seeing it, or without really practicing it, it's quite deceptive if you watch it on video.
And Guru Mike, let me ask you, the stick in Serrata, is Serrata a stick system? Is it using the stick as a replacement for the longer blade? And some Philippine martial arts are impact weapons specific. Others, are very edge aware and are training edge weapons. What are the weapons that are taught in Serrata?
Serrada Escrima is primarily a blade art. Even though we practice with a stick, it is primarily a blade art, and we utilize both stick and knife in a number. Initially, within our counters, of course, we're always practicing with a stick, not only for safety, but we don't want our students to go out and automatically think that they're going to be able to utilize a knife and utilize it effectively. Not everyone is attracted to Serrada Escrima, or for that matter, Filipino martial arts, because they don't necessarily feel it is effective because of the stick. And that too is a misinterpretation of the art or the Filipino martial arts as a whole.
Now, I've seen a lot of, I've seen a lot more of Serrata knife work than I have stick work, just through some acquaintances and friends of mine that just happen to focus on that more. In the training in general, how is that balanced? Is the longer weapon, is it given more emphasis? Is the shorter knife given more emphasis, or is it balanced?
It's balanced, and the reason I say that it's balanced is simply because anything that you can perform, any counter, any strike, any slice, any thrust that you can perform with a stick, you can do with a knife. You can also do with your empty hand. So in other words, the stick is directly translated to knife and to empty hand. So having proficient movement and accurate movement within your stick will also allow you to have proficient and accurate movement within the knife, as well as with movement of empty hand. The difference between the two is simply that you have to realize that when you're performing a counter with a stick, you're actually striking. And therefore the method of striking as opposed to cutting, if you have a knife, is quite different.
Now, another aspect of training that I personally have seen my friends kind of on a treasure hunt for is the Serrada empty hand. And the cadena de mano was something I had heard a lot from friends of mine, very eager to find someone qualified to teach it and very eager to find someone that was willing to share it with them. Can you tell me a little bit about the empty hand applications in Serrada? Because, again, this is a misconception, I think, with most Filipino martial arts, that it's a weapon art. And I think a lot is missed as far as the empty hand applications.
Well, again, one thing we have to keep in mind is that the empty hand applications are a direct translation of the stick or a knife initially. So the person or persons, I should say, that were most responsible for the empty hand movement within the system of Serrada Escrima were Max Sarmiento and Mikey Nye. Both of those gentlemen have had contributed quite heavily, to the empty hand portion of Serrada Escrima, and both extremely fascinating, and though they could be a story all in within themselves. So Angel's stick work combined with the empty hand that he provided, as well as the empty hand translations that Max Sarmiento and Mike and I also introduced, became the system as a whole, so to speak. So again, initially when you look at a counter, and we'll just, rather than a block or anything of that nature, we'll just say a counter for a particular angle. That same counter can be performed again with a knife or with an empty hand. Also within that, of course, is the C-hand drills. The C-hand drills are parrying and trapping drills that are also part of the system, as well as what's commonly known throughout most Filipino martial arts, as well as JKD, as being hubad wobad. And the hubad is also something that we introduce within our system as well.
Now, Guru Mike, let me ask you, and this is just more of a personal question than about Serrada specifically, but in the, and as a younger man, I count myself as guilty here as well. But what I see a lot of is people that combine tactics and techniques from different arts, and some of them are much more successful than others. And, as I said, I'm guilty of this as well as a younger guy. When I'm 18, 19, I wanted to try everything, and, I wanted to, make judgments about things without really having a profound understanding of what I was doing. And just because you've been in the arts for such a long time, and because you train in multiple arts, I wanted to get your opinion on this. But I've come to a different appreciation at this point in my life and in my training career, where I feel like most answers are going to be available to students within the framework of their own art. And all arts are not created equal, but all true arts. I feel like most answers to the common problems that we are all trying to solve are there. And sometimes the students just need to stick it out long enough to get to that point, or to get a level of understanding where they can, be able to see what's actually there. From your experience in training in different arts and training them for such a long period of time, do you train multiple arts because of just enjoyment of training different arts, or do you do it because you want to, solve, additional problems that you need to borrow some tactics from another place? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I definitely believe that there is something to learn from everyone. It's the glass half full, glass half empty. Once again, if you go into a dojo, if you go into a gym, if you go into a mixed martial arts scenario, and you're not open to what the possibilities may be, you as a student, me as a student, or me as an instructor for that matter, pass up the opportunity for a great deal of information. Now, that said, when an individual, I'll give you a perfect example. Myself, as you know, and as I've stated, my initial career was in boxing as well as within the Korean arts, Taekwondo, Hapkido, and some Judo. The contusion blocks of a traditional martial art, such as I was taught, and again, my instructor, my God, was phenomenal. He was a man, ex-military from Korea, hard body, hard way of teaching, body against body, leg against leg kicking, your blocks were arm against arm, just heavy duty body hardening training, for the sake of body hardening. That said, until I opened myself up to another way of thinking, and rather than just thinking that a outside block or an inside outside block or a high or head block or a low block was strictly to slam down on top of that limb and break that bone, I was not aware of the intricacies that were built into those particular blocks. And I'll go a little deeper into that. For instance, if a person within a traditional system, whether it be Shotokan, Shorin-ryu, Taekwondo, whatever, they're doing their blocks, and they're taught these blocks all the way up to black belt and beyond. And they're not introduced to the subtleties of those blocks and the areas that can be affected by those blocks. An inside, outside, or an outside block, for instance, rather than just going to the forearm or the punching arm of an opponent, you've got the radial nerve, you've got the ulnar nerve, and those are all striking points that when striking those particular nerves, with, of course, the strength that has been built into those blocks, but actually looking for that with a purpose, in order to not necessarily break bone, but to actually cause a stunning blow to that particular nerve so that you can have a follow-up or actually go into wrist locks or things of that nature. Without having that all-encompassing information, you're limited. And I have found that not necessarily all instructors, but some are guilty of this. Mine, unfortunately was as well, that they're not particularly going into the depth that they need to within those particular techniques. Likewise, when striking with a stick, it doesn't matter whether it's Serrada, whether it's Kali, Dos Patas, or whatever. When you're striking a person, you're also focusing that strike on a particular point, on that arm, or on the leg, or their bladder, or wherever it may be. However, if you're not precise enough to strike or to strike within the area of that nerve or that particular area, you're not going to have the necessary effect to be as effective as one might be. Now, granted, when you have a stick in your hand and the other person has a weapon, obviously the disarm or things of that nature in regards to snaking or what have you, that is not the primary disarm. The primary disarm is actually slamming this stick into their hand and hopefully busting their fingers or their knuckles so that they can no longer hold that weapon. Beyond that, within Serrada Escrima, you take a simple, basic counter, such as an inside counter. And that inside counter, obviously, you're striking the stick, you have your follow-ups and your movements. But if you just tweak those movements slightly, that strike is no longer going to that stick, that strike is no longer going to that hand, but that strike, rather than taking the weapon hand out of the picture, is actually striking to the side of the head within that same technique. So in other words, as you're taking your 45-degree angle step forward and you're wanting to take that hand or that weapon out of the picture, you also must realize that that is not the only technique available for and to be considered an inside counter technique. A simple parry and strike into the side of the head, to the temple, to the jawline is also an angle one inside. However, it's much more combative.
And Guru Mike, before we wrap up, let me ask you, if people listening are interested in exploring the art of Cabales Serrada, where can they go? Tell us about the Federation. What's available to them as far as learning opportunities?
Sure. The World Serrada Escrima Federation, I actually have a blog site that I provide many different things, including learning videos available there. It's called defensivecombat.blogspot.com. And right now that's our primary site. I can also be reached personally. If you can go ahead and put out my phone number. It's 314-216-9011. And that's my business line. Anyone can leave a message and get in contact with me there. Or simply send me an email, guru.michael.schwartz@outlook.com. The Federation has many opportunities. We recognize many individuals in other systems, and we are always open to hear from everyone and anyone.
Excellent. Well, Guru Mike, thank you very much for being part of the show today. Really appreciate it, and I feel like it was unfortunately a little too short of a time to be able to get all of the questions that I wanted to get. So I'd like to invite you on now to be back with us at a future date and talk a little bit more about Serrada. Looking forward to making this a part 2 if you're game.
Absolutely, not a problem. There is a great deal more to cover in regards to technique, in regards to the system itself, and of course in regards to history and the other individuals out there who represent the Serrada Escrima system.
Great. Well, Guru Mike, thank you very much again for your time. We really appreciate it. We look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, Mr. Vargas.